32 H&R Magnum, and we have our double tap 60 grain lead free solid copper hollow point. So it's come to my attention that Heritage is actually releasing a Rough Rider in 32 H&R Magnum. That has a 6.5 inch barrel, so I think some people might want to see the performance of 32 H&R Magnum to see how it does, because that is a pretty economical option for a little revolver like that. So we'll see what we get with our double tap ammunition. So this is a 60 grain solid copper hollow point rated at 1395 feet per second through a 6-inch barrel. That's all that's showing. I'm going to test this through two different barrel lengths here. So I'm going to use my 4.2-inch Ruger SP 101 and 327 Federal Magnum and my Ruger LCR 1.875-inch barrel. We'll see how these do. I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics, and the reason why I do that is sometimes we don't get hollow point expansion with some rounds. So I want to make sure that we try to get our best potential to get that. So we'll go into plain clear ballistics to see if we get some hollow point expansion. Then I'm going to do our real world simulation after that, which is going to be 4 layers of sweatshirt material followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics in that format is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh. So if we got like 12 inches in this gel here, that would be more like 6 inches in our real living target. So we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot from both barrel lengths, and then our real world simulation shot. Then of course I'm going to shoot the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we're going to run this through our 4.2-inch barrel. It is rated at 1395 feet per second from a 6-inch barrel. So this is a little bit shorter barrel, so we'll probably get less velocity than that. But let's see how close we get to 1395 feet per second through my 4.2-inch Ruger SP 101. $14.07, $14.61, $12.97, $13.97, $12.93, $12.49. Not particularly consistent. Started dropping the velocity quite a bit. That's interesting. So we'll run it through my little snub here. So how close I get to that 1395 feet per second in this LCR here. $11.24, $10.85, $10.26, $10.57, $10.21, $11.35. All right, so the recoil on that is kind of like shooting a standard 38 special. Not a lot of recoil, but moving a lot faster. So not particularly consistent velocity overall, but I mean, it is all very fast. So I'll have to put up the chronograph in front of the ballistic gel block so we can at least see what kind of velocity is actually going to be hitting the gel block. So let's see how these do in our ballistic gel test now. All right, first up we'll do our plain clear ballistics gel shot. I like to do this so that, you know, we don't get our hollow point clogged with any fabric or anything like that, and see if these things will expand and how well they will do in just a plain clear ballistic gel shot. So let's see what we get from our 4.2-inch barrel here. $12.95 feet per second. And let's hit that from our little LCR snub here. $11.53 feet per second. Let's go take a look. Those things wanted to try to touch each other there. They both went at some weird angles. They did not intersect though, so that's good. Now, one thing I see with the 4-inch barrel is there's a little piece of copper, like it broke off a little bit of piece of that there. As we're with the little snub, I don't see that at all. So our first 3-inch piece here, our 4.2 inch on the bottom, our snub on the top. Not a big difference there in overall damage, and honestly going into the gel block, not a big difference there either, with those difference in velocity here. Now our penetration is kind of low with these. With our 4.2 inch barrel, we got 11.5 inches. Camera parallax, the way this camera stretches will make it look like it's over 12 inches, but we're at about 11.5 inches from a straight on view. Now with our snub, we're at about 10.75 inches. So a little bit of a difference there, but let's put on our fabric, put in our rib simulation, and see how these do in our real world simulation before we make any decisions on this ammo. All right, our real world simulation: 4 layers of sweatshirt material followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. A lot of times fabric and also rib simulation will lower that expansion a little bit, so that's why I do the plain clear ballistic shot. If you didn't know why, is just to try to get expansion. It's really just an expansion test, as where this is our true ballistic test here. So if we don't get expansion in this, we can at least look at the clear ballistic shot and see how it did. So let's hit this from our 4.2 inch barrel now. 1470 feet per second. Big difference from the last shot there. Now from our snub. 1097, a little bit lower than what it was before out of this. So let's go take a look. And I know what people are going to say. Your chronograph's junk. You need to get a lab radar or whatever these other radar ones are. I'm going to disagree. Whenever I test some good ammo, like Federal HST and stuff like that, it'll say a given rated velocity, and I'll test it through a similar barrel length, and I will get that velocity, and I'll get very consistent velocity over and over and over again. And then sometimes when I test boutique ammo, it's like all over the place. Well, I'm not going to look at it and be like, there's something wrong with the chronograph. I'm going to look at it and say, you know, there's something wrong with the ammo. So, and also the way that this has more broken pieces from the 4.2 inch barrel would suggest it was hitting upper 1400 feet per second. And the way this one from the snub underpenetrated would suggest that it was moving at this velocity it was moving at. So we'll take a look at our rib simulation here. And yeah, with our 4.2 inch barrel, it is fragmenting out. So it's actually a smaller hole than the one from our snub here. So this is making a bigger hole through the rib simulation. Energy dump is pretty good with both. Definitely more with the 4.2 inch barrel. Now with that, we got some fragmentation pieces, and we have almost none of the petals left there, and we got about 11.5 inches with our 4.2 inch barrel. With our little snub 1.875 inch barrel, we only got about 7.5 inches. So what is that, like 3 3/4 inches in a real living target? So that would probably under penetrate. You know, it's enough to hit something vital from a front on shot. And here's the thing that people got to understand, which I deal with this a lot on my channel. People will say, I won't carry anything that doesn't hit 12 inches because the FBI says that's what you need. Well, the FBI is talking about law enforcement. They're talking about going through the arm for the side shot, and going through arms, going through arm bones, side shot through ribs. Like shooting back at a suspect that's shooting at you as they're turning and shooting at you while they're running. You know, you need 12 inches to simulate maybe 6, 7, 8 inches in a real living target. You know, go through the side shot. Rounds like 32 H&R Magnum are going to be used a little bit differently, in my opinion. It's probably more like a woman who's about to be grabbed front on from an unarmed man, and she produces a 32 H&R Magnum snub out of her purse because it is a very low recoil cartridge, something she might really carry, and blasts a couple shots straight on through the sternum. Well, in this application, it's going to work perfectly. So that's just something you got to keep in mind. So technically speaking, this stuff did bad, but overall, we did get a lot of damage in there, and I think it does serve a purpose. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets. Then I'm going to shoot our steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Here's the one from our 4.2 inch barrel and the one from our 1.875 inch barrel. So we can see that this 4.2 inch barrel is making it move just a little bit too fast because it's busting off the pieces of the petals here. And I tried to recover the petals, and not only did, you know, the petals break off, but the petals themselves appear to have broken into little pieces. So it was very difficult to try to recover those. As we're with our 1.875 inch barrel through the LCR, I mean, everything's pretty good here. We had good expansion, so that's not bad expansion, but obviously these underpenetrate quite a bit. Now going to our real world simulation, even worse fragmentation there with our 4.2 inch barrel, and our little 1.875 inch actually performed how you might expect. So here is our little rabbit here, left over from the 4.2 inch barrel. Broke off most of those petals. It looks like they have 6 petals, so only 2 of them are left with the 4.2 inch barrel. As we're with the little snub here, all of them are there. So it looks like this propelled at like 1100 feet per second, like the snub is pretty good. Once you get up there, you know, 1300, 1400, or even past 1200, you know, we're starting to see an issue with the 4.2 inch barrel. So little snub here, 1.875 inch, good performance. 4.2 inch, it's not bad performance in terms of, you know, effectiveness, but breaking off those pieces is not ideal. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, which is 42 feet away. So I'm just going to get a sight picture, pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target, and to see how these things do out of these different barrel lengths and, you know, different weight of guns as well. So there's a big difference in the weight. I think this LCR down here is around 20 ounces. This is a little bit closer to 30 ounces. Keep in mind, I don't shoot this particular revolver very well. There's just something about it. The grip size and frame size is kind of small for my hands, so it doesn't shoot that well, but I'll try to get an idea of how it shoots and what kind of recoil we got going on with this. So 4.2 inch barrel, see how this does. All right. Looks like I pulled one a little bit, and, you know, very low recoil, to be honest, out of that gun. It's out of that particular revolver, it's definitely less recoil than a standard pressure 38 special out of a 4-inch barrel. So snub nose, let's see how this does. All right, so they are wanting to whip kind of high for me out of this, and the recoil here, again, I'm gonna call it kind of like a standard pressure 38 special recoil. I mean, there's a little bit less actual recoil in your hand, but it is slightly snappier than a 38 special, which equals out to being roughly the same. So let me back it up a little bit and see how these do from some more distance. All right, 40 yards from the target, and some people say, why 40 yards? Well, you can do some research on 40 yards and self-defense shootings. I think you'd be surprised at what you might find. But I'm just going to fire off really slow with these from this 40 yards and just kind of see how these particular rounds shoot. So from the 4.2 inch barrel, see how these do. All right, those don't do too bad. They are tending to consistently hit a little bit low and a little bit left out of this particular revolver. Let's see how they do it from my little LCR here. Yeah, right over the target, and that's something I saw up close. I'm aiming center. and then they shot over the target. So I'm gonna have to aim really low on that target. I think it's funny is because now they actually seemed like they hit about point of aim with that. So here's the thing. What I'm seeing very much is something that happens with large spreads of velocity. And this would go back onto saying that there's nothing wrong with my chronograph. I typically see these type of phenomenon with weird accuracy like that when I get rounds of ammo that have hundreds of feet per second below or between shot to shot velocity, because it will significantly change that point of impact at distance like that. And I saw that with the 4.2 inch barrel too. One shot really high, I held the same point of aim. So looking at this, in theory, this isn't bad ammo, but in practice, I think there's a lot better rounds out here. The thing with this is I think we're hyper focusing a little bit on too much on expansion with these rounds. They're only 60 grains, which for a 32 H&R Magnum even is kind of light, because typical is 80 to 100 maybe, and even 80 is kind of low. So 60 grains moving this fast, yeah, it's common sense why we're getting over expansion, fragmentation, under penetration, all of that. Do I think they'd be effective? Yeah, especially out of a snub. Close range, they're going to break up. They're going to do everything they need to do. But for me, I don't like the consistency of this. And I would prefer something that's going to penetrate a little bit deeper. And there are plenty of rounds that do just as well as these, with a little less recoil even. So, I mean, they're not the worst thing I've ever seen, but they are really, purpose-driven for expansion. I think they would make a fantastic vermin round, like legitimately vermin, like where we live here. I think it would stop within a raccoon or something like that. But self-defense, I think I want something a little bit heavier bullet with this caliber. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like. Thanks for watching.